When everything we consume is the worst thing ever by some mouth breather on the internet, how is anything truly the worst thing ever? Time for the only podcast to officially create a list of the worst movies ever made. The only one. For real. Worst movies ever.
Worst movies ever. I'm firmly in the camp that there is literally no piece of art, no movie that is so unassailably untouchable that they can't be remixed, remade, or whatever. There's a lot of people out there that sit and talk movies and are passionate about cinema that always get so up in arms every single time any movie is remade. Even though the vast majority of products that we watch and we consume are IP that are derivative in adaptations or have been remixed or remade from prior sources. So when it came to the movie we're talking about today, which has a long history of its existence coming into being, I needed to touch upon the fact that I have no problems at all with anything, and I mean anything, being remade or redone. How does that relate into Children of the Living Dead, made in 2001, directed by Tor Ramsey today? Well, Children of the Living Dead supposedly is a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, but not the Night of the Living Dead that you all know. Back in the 90s, there were like whisperings that John Russo, because a long history about Night of the Living Dead falling into public domain because they didn't put the copyright in the title card, which immediately put it into public domain. The most famous independent movie to make all the money, but nothing for the filmmakers because it went straight in the public domain and everyone else made money on that movie. John Russo, in his attempt, because if you remember, George Romero with Tom Savini remade Night of the Living Dead with Tony Todd and a bunch of other actors in the 90s. And that's a good movie, by the way. You should check it out. John Russo wanted a bit of that money. So he decided to produce his own version of Night of the Living Dead because, you know, as public domain states, you can make derivative works off of a prior work if it's in the public domain. So what did he do? He made what was considered the 30th anniversary edition of Night of the Living Dead. Now, folks, I was excited to see this thing when it came out. I remember buying the clamshell fucking VHS of this with the gray cover. And it was just like, oh my God, Night of the Living Dead, folks, if you don't know anything about me, is one of my favorite movies. I've watched it probably almost more than just about any other horror movie out there. From when I was young up until now. It was one of the first horror movies I ever saw on VHS way back in the day when my dad brought home our fucking wood-paneled top-loader VHS VCR. The two tapes he brought home, and I reminded him this just like a month ago when we were all sitting around talking and it came up. The two VHS tapes he brought home were Night of the Living Dead and Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. And mind you, I was in elementary school when I watched this. But anyway, so the significance of the 30th anniversary edition of this movie was that John Russo went and shot a new intro, outro, and new zombie scenes and new scenes that were intermixed with the original Night of the Living Dead. So this was a brand new vision, a brand new version of the movie that had never been seen before. So I bought this thing and I was so unbelievably excited to see what this could be and what it was. And then when I watched it, and mind you, it's been a really long time and justifiably so, I remember thinking this was the biggest piece of shit I had ever watched in my entire life. Not only did the news scenes not match up with the fucking original movie, they were of such low quality. And I mean low quality as in the acting was terrible. The shot selection and editorial were just abysmal. They just didn't fit or make sense with the story that was being presented. So immediately, all that excitement for the 30th anniversary edition of Night of the Living Dead just completely farted and shot out the window, and everybody just buried this thing. But I'm sure they made a lot of money on all us marks that went out and bought this thing. So to capitalize on that, Russo decided to produce a sequel, his own, in hopes that he could make his own franchise the way that Romero did. Make his own sequel. And this is all just straight off the wiki. So whether it's true or not is up for debate. And you guys, you know how I feel about wiki. It's quote unquote truth. So it's like if you were hanging out at the bar just talking with someone, oh yeah, I know this person. This is what happened to them. It's just hearsay, right? It's just secondhand information. So supposedly he got in touch with Tor Ramsey in hopes that he could make his own sequel that he had written, because if you remember, John Russo kind of wrote Night of the Living Dead. And they were going to make their own series, but Tor Ramsey instead decided to give that to, because he was putting up most of the money, decided to give that to his niece, I believe, or something. I don't remember exactly it's some cockamamie thing where all of the control got taken away from John Russo, and Karen Lee Wolf wrote this movie that literally has nothing to do with Night of the Living Dead other than there being zombies in it. Children of the Living Dead, folks. I saw this again because I was such a mark for Night of the Living Dead and the Living Dead series back in the day. I immediately went and got this, and this has been historically one of my least favorite movies I've ever seen in my life. And it has probably been since 2000. Well, this came out in 2001. I think I saw it that year, if not the next year, and I never watched it again. So this podcast today is the first time I've watched it in over 20 years. Now, did it still hold up as being one of the worst things I've ever fucking watched? Well, here's the plot for Children of the Living Dead, and thank you for sticking with me with that long preamble for this, but I think it's necessary to understand the history of this movie, to understand where this thing comes from and why it is so fucking terrible. But the plot of this thing is so fucking cockamamie because obviously this is supposed to take place in the Night of the Living Dead universe. But here's the plot. 15 years after escaping prison and going on a murderous rampage that resulted in a zombie outbreak, Abbott Hayes, a local zombie rapist. I'm giving you a pregnant pause because the lead zombie in this is a zombie rapist. Along with his zombie minions, terrorize the local town when a car dealership looks to tear down his farm and desecrate a nearby graveyard. You heard me right. This is not the first instance in which we've had one of these knockoff Night of the Living Dead sequels, remakes, additions to the series. We a long time ago on Astro Radio Z, we did an episode called Night of the Living Deadsploitation, where we went in depth into all the knockoffs, all of the serializations, all of the remakes, in all the derivative works of Night of the Living Dead due to its, public domain status. And there have been a few of these things in which the creators have decided to make a lead zombie character a rapist for reasons. The other one that I believe right off the top of my head was the remake of Day of the Dead called Day of the Dead Bloodline. They turned Bub, the good zombie in that movie, into a deplorable rapist. And I'm sorry if I'm saying the hard R and it triggers you guys. I should have put a warning out there, but that's how it is. It's reality. And I honestly, I don't want to get into the discussion of like censoring language. I always want to be mindful of the things that I say here on this podcast. And I always want to be inclusive of people. But I also don't want to go into the realm of remixing my language when I could just directly speak towards things. You know that thing where nobody wants to talk about suicide anymore? It's unaliving, which means the exact same fucking thing. Or on the internet where instead of saying porn, they say corn. Obviously done just to get past fucking the algorithm, right? We're on a podcast here. I'm going to speak directly. I'm not going to say grapist. If that like diminishes the returns on the viewership or puts a copy or like some sort of flag on the YouTube version of this podcast, so be it. But that's how I'm going to speak on this podcast. So I apologize towards anyone that may be triggered by some of the language that I'm using, but that is an accurate like description of what is going on in this movie. The lead character, this Abbott Hayes that turns into our like Nosferatu style fucking vampire rapist. Is that? It's such a stupid fucking inclusion into what is just like being a zombie isn't bad enough. It's almost like they wanted to make Abbott Hayes, this lead zombie in this movie, Freddy Krueger, right? And I had this conversation with somebody on Twitch the other day where they were under the assumption, and this is a wild side tangent, and I apologize, guys. Freddy Krueger wasn't a child molester. Like, it wasn't implied that that was part of the equation. I would love to hear you guys in the comments on the Spotify listing or in the groups or on the fucking Instagram or wherever I post this thing. I would love to hear, do you feel that it wasn't implicit and it wasn't like subtextually there that Freddy Krueger was like diddling kids? Because I had somebody who's like, nope, it wasn't until the remake. I'm like, just because they explicitly said it in the remake didn't mean that it wasn't already there. It was clear that was part of his character, which is why it's so weird. Everyone's so fucking cool with Freddy Krueger. Anyways, sorry about that. So let's get back to Children of the Living Dead, a movie that I'm going to side tangent and talk about anything else other than talking about this movie for very clear reasons. What is the verdict on this thing? Well, this is a very low budget production. It was actually shot on film, so it doesn't look like an absolutely cheap piece of shit. It has zero convincing acting, extremely spotty audio that includes a voiceover on almost everybody. And in one of the most completely brain dead, pointless scripts I've ever seen. Like, think about the worst Hellraiser sequel and how they just plopped in fucking Pinhead into some script that had nothing to do with the Hellraiser lore or any of the previous stories. This is nothing more than a zombie movie that has ties to Night of the Living Dead that just puts zombies in it in order to try and swindle you out of some schmeckles. It sounds like I'm really coming down on this thing, doesn't it? It's bad, but it's just stupid enough to be enjoyable for a while. By the end, however, you're going to be extremely thankful this thing is over. This movie is so fucking dumb. And it actually is a little humorous for a while until you realize nothing happens in it until the end. So it's not one of the worst movies I've seen. It's just a really bad movie. And it surprised me to say that watching it this time, because when we sit and actually talk about its existence, why it's here, I can feel my blood begin to boil. Like, this is the kind of exploitation that a lot of us get up in arms about, right? But when you watch the movie and you just take the movie in for what it is, it's a piece of shit, but it's kind of funny. Like, half of this movie, I was enjoying how stupid it was and the ridiculousness of the dialogue. But it's not good. So let's get to the goods.
What is good?
The opening zombie field scene, which is oddly reminiscent of Night of the Living Dead and the remake of Night of the Living Dead, where it's in a field and there's like helicopter shots of zombies approaching, a bunch of good old boys with guns shooting them. I liked this scene mostly because we have Tom Savini as the lead actor in full sex machine mode. Hopefully you guys get that reference. I know most of you do, but those of you that don't, he played a character in From Dusk Till Dawn called Sex Machine that was all about kicking ass. And that's how he exactly is in the opening sequence of this movie. And it's actually quite enjoyable. The sequence goes on for like 10, 13 minutes, something like that. And you would be hornswoggled and bamboozled into thinking this was actually a decent movie watching the beginning of this, even though it's got horrible day for night all over top of it. But the main caveat for this opening sequence, which I actually found really punchy, I thought the performances were just good enough, and it had okay, like, gore effects. Not really. I mean, mostly, squibs and stuff like that, but it actually kind of worked. The main bad on this sequence was that it's obvious they only had 10 people that could be zombies. So they just kept using those 10 zombies over and over and cut it fast enough to make you think you were seeing a lot more than you were. Another good I had was sometimes there's effects work that outdoes the obvious low budget of this movie. And especially the outfit of the Abbott Hayes zombie, which looks basically like a Nosferatu. I've heard some people claim that they thought this was like some cheap Spirit Halloween type mask thing. I thought it actually looked decent. They lit it in a way in which it, covers up any of the shortcomings that are coming in with the makeup and how, like, quickly I'm sure this thing was thrown together. So there's some okay fucking effects work in this movie. The main good that I have for this is that the editor of this movie, Louis Schonbrun or Tom Debensky, who are labeled as the editors of this movie, these guys work their ass off. This movie is super punchy. Even when it's boring, the editorial is the best thing about this movie, and it saves it from being completely unwatchable slop. Because the acting is horseshit and the script is awful. Like, the vast majority of the people in this movie are not actors. So editorial, and I don't say this often with these shitty movies we watch, editorial really, really, for this kind of thing, saved it. Saved it from me just saying this was literally one of the worst things I ever saw. There's a sequence, folks, and this is another good. There's a group of kids that are driving their way in a van, a la Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to a concert. And they pass by the Abbott Hayes estate. They're only in this movie to give you the lore. They're just talking about Abbott Hayes. They're talking about how he used to steal kids and do his thing with kids and kill kids and give you the lore on how this whole thing came about and how he haunts the locals and all this shit. Of course, they stop to like piss on the grave of his mom and whatever. And Abbott Hayes ends up like jumping in front of them as they drive, and these kids drive off a fucking cliff with a van, and there's a full cliff dive with a fucking van, and it's wonderful. It's so funny. It's so stupid. The only thing that was missing is that the van doesn't blow up. If it would have blown up, I would have given this movie 3 stars just for that scene alone. The last fucking good that I have for this thing. There's this guy that runs a local motel. It's Sam Nicotero. I don't know the relation to Greg Nicotero. I'm thinking they're brothers. I could be wrong. I'm not looking it up. But he looks just like Greg Nicotero. And he runs this local motel. And in an earlier sequence in this movie, he was a grave robber that ended up getting scared off by Abbott Hayes. And now later in the movie, when the plot actually starts, it takes like a good half hour for the fucking plot to actually start in this movie. He tells somebody that he used to work in a graveyard when he was younger. But we just saw him in a scene that was labeled 1 year prior to this fucking scene. So I guess he's technically right that he used to work in a graveyard when he was younger. This stupid line of dialogue made me laugh so much. It's like literally shots before this one, it said 1 year later, prior to him being scared off as a grave robber. It's so fucking dumb. Let's get to the bads, because that's all there is in this movie.
What is bad?
When you start the movie up and there's an opening credit sequence, and I kind of like the opening credit sequence over top of like fire, and it's the fire of the pyre for the zombies or whatever. There's just this music that sounds like someone had a keyboard with sound effects on it that just randomly hitting, and it made no sense. Like, what the fuck is this clusterfuck of music that we're hearing over these cheap-ass credits? It's terrible. Speaking of audio, the VO that is over top of everything is so unconvincing. It's not as bad as, say, our last episode on Rat's Night of Terror, where it strips people of all, like, accurate emotion, but it's very clearly obvious. And it really takes what could be convincing roles and convincing portrayals of these people and turns it into like, okay, this is amateur hour shit. The audio is just not well mixed as well in this movie, and it doesn't help the VO at all. Dialogue, even when it's re-recorded and overdubbed, gets lost in the mix quite a bit. At least in the version that I watched. I'm not sure that this is out there in like any HD form. I have it on DVD. So that's what I watched. And it doesn't appear like it's streaming anywhere either. This film, the cinematographer is Bill Hinsman, who is like the lead zombie of Night of the Living Dead. He shoots this thing and it varies between it being actually like interesting to look at, trying canted angles, coming up in camera moves, and it's interesting to look at, but it's also wildly underexposed at parts, extremely workmanlike in other parts, and sometimes just looks like I'm not convinced he's the only one that shot this thing. It's all over the place. There's one shot in this that I'm sure they thought was really fucking clever, where they have the camera in an extreme close-up on the cop's face, and he's wearing his aviator sunglasses, you know, those cop sunglasses that are highly reflective so you can't see what the cop's looking at. And they have an entire dialogue sequence where the person he's talking to is in front of them is reflected in the glasses. This shot goes on forever while they have a conversation, and you're like, man, you really thought this was clever. It was an awful way to cover a fucking shot. It's good for literally like a second or two, but having an entire dialogue, just fucking terrible. The acting in this movie, as I said before, is universally awful. Mostly thanks to the really terrible script. And if it wasn't for the editorial, the acting you would not be able to watch this because the people are so terrible in this movie. So, one of the main plot points of Children of the Living Dead is that this Abbott Hayes character is able to amass a fucking zombie horde. You never quite know how many zombies he actually has. You think he only has like 4 or 5, and then there's a siege at the end of this movie in which there's clearly like 40 to 50 zombies. It makes no sense. But one of the main plot points is that a cemetery that's nearby the Abbott Hayes estate that he resides and just sits and breathes heavily in the barn. He, like Ed Gein, steals from the local graveyard that's nearby and creates zombies. There's a main plot point where they're looking to basically shut down this graveyard to prevent this from happening anymore. And the cop tells the caretaker of this graveyard, mind you, I wasn't aware people actually owned graveyards. Is this a thing? Let me know. I thought it was just basically like county property that was designated. You know, I didn't realize people actually owned or made money on graveyards. It makes sense. I get it. You can charge people to bury their dead there. God, that feels so gross. A cop is telling the caretaker, you're going to have to get 24-hour surveillance out here. Mind you, this graveyard is literally like 15 miles from town, like 10, 15 miles from town, in the middle of nowhere on a rural road. How are you going to afford to put fucking 24-hour surveillance out at this place? And the cop then tells this guy, you need to sell this hellhole at any cost. Who the fuck buys cemeteries? Is there a huge market for people looking to buy a cemetery in a rural area? How much money are you really making off of this? God, it's so fucking stupid. Another really bad on this movie is the awful day for night. Like, all of this was shot except for the final siege of the diner that happens, where all these people eventually wind up at this diner and the zombie horde led by Abbott Hayes attacks them. It's all really poorly day for nighted. And it's hard to watch. In the middle of this movie, when we find out the thrust of the plot is that there's this slimeball auto dealership just looking to basically lay waste to the Abbott Hayes estate, along with this graveyard that Abbott Hayes has been using as his curation center for his zombie horde. There is such a long period of time where nothing happens in this movie. The actual plot of this, and you're wondering why this was chosen as like the springboard for a new zombie series, other than I'm guessing they thought Abbott Hayes was a strong enough villain that they could turn him into like a Freddy style, you know, big time villain. He's not. He doesn't do fucking anything in this movie other than stand off to the side and breathe heavily. So the main plot of this thing is so fucking dumb and so uselessly boring that you're left to wonder, why was this ever chosen to be a thing? Who gives a fuck? It's almost like fucking they saw Poltergeist and like, oh, that's a good idea, but let's do it with a used car lot. So fucking dumb. So as we get to the climax of this movie, And people start noticing that there are zombies attacking everyone, including the construction people that are trying to lay waste to this cemetery. The cops show up at this diner, which is essentially the only thing in fucking town. You never see a town in this movie. You only see this diner. The cop tells the guy that is organizing the construction effort of this fucking used car lot not to go out to the graveyard at night in order to, save their gear and save the people that may be out there. But please come to the diner where all the zombies are. This final zombie battle where everybody just comes to the diner and just kind of throws shit around and shoots zombies. And you don't know really how many construction people there are. You don't know how many zombies there are. There's no real coverage that indicates there's wide shots, but it's such a clusterfuck and so dark that you don't really know how many people are involved. It just looks like anarchy. This whole scene goes on for like 10, 15 minutes. And then just ends. The main zombie survives at the end because he didn't really do anything the whole movie, and the entire battle that takes place just goes on and then ends. You're not even sure all the zombies are dead. It just all of a sudden hard cuts to the next day where there's smoke coming up and there's paramedics. And then the movie just fucking ends and goes to credits that we have to sit and watch every single actor have their own short little scene with their title come up. God, it's so fucking bad. It makes you wonder, why the fuck did I watch this? Is there a single person anxiously waiting for the sequel to Children of the Living Dead? No. Let's get to the what the fucks.
What the fuck is that?
As I had said before, zombie rapist? Why? Why was any of this needed in this movie about zombies attacking people attempting to make a used car lot on their graveyard? Why was any of this fucking lore necessary? It makes no fucking sense. Unless you were attempting to make a new Freddy Krueger, which is the only explanation I can find or I can think of why you would do this or why you would need this character to have this lore. So stupid. Another piece of lore that makes no fucking sense. On top of Abbott Hayes having the lore of being a zombie rapist, he also has the lore of being raised by his mom as a girl, even though at no point in this movie is he presented as a feminine presence. Another piece of lore why is that in there? Because it's easy back in the day to shame trans people? What the fuck are you doing? So, the used car lot. Usually, don't you want to make like used car lots in a metropolitan area where people you have a good like probability that people are going to drive by this place and potentially buy a car? Why would you build it in the middle of fucking nowhere on top of a graveyard when if you're buying it in the middle of nowhere, you could just buy a fucking plot of land and just build it? So instead, you have to make your job even harder and have to dig up a bunch of fucking caskets and do all this pre-work. The entire point of this movie in the setup makes no fucking sense. In the last fucking what the fuck that I have, and I want to be done because this movie, like, I can tell that I don't even want to talk about it anymore, and maybe I will put this. No, I can't put this as one of the worst movies ever. It does piss me off. As I sit and talk about this movie, it pisses me the fuck off. It's that fucking bad. It's that fucking stupid. It's so fucking stupid. They call the construction workers to come with the guns, as I had said before, right? Instead of going to where the zombies aren't, where they could be safe, and just wait it out into the morning when they could get reinforcements. He calls all these construction workers that have no experience in like battle whatsoever to get all of the guns, because construction people sure be fucking having guns all the time. They arrive at the diner where the siege happens, greatly outnumbered by the zombies, but are told to go inside rather than take out the zombies. Like nothing in this movie makes sense. The things that the people are asked to do don't make any sense. The plot doesn't make any sense. The lore doesn't make any sense. Things just happen because they're supposed to happen. So these guys show up. There's zombies outside. They somehow make their way into the diner with weapons instead of, while they're outside, just attacking the zombies. So there's an extra step in the process where they have to go inside, talk to the cop, who then rallies them to tell them, that thing you were about to do outside, go do it. Then they go outside and do it. Fuck this movie. It sucks. It fucking sucks. And that's all I got for Children of the Living Dead. This is the closest I've been, guys, to putting something on the list, even though I said the first half of this movie is so kind of just gleefully stupid that I enjoyed it. The second half of this movie, how everything compiles to being so insanely, insufferably stupid, it put the history of this movie in context with the stupidity you're watching. It's hard not just to get fucking irate about it. Like, this is an insufferable piece of shit by the end of it. And to think that they were going to sit and try and hornswoggle all us old Night of the Living Dead marks by trying to, like, appeal to us as if this was a sequel, it's insulting. And it's not a big surprise that every last person other than the creators, the director, the producer, the writer, have written this off as a tremendous piece of shit. Tom Savini has nothing good to say about this. Fucking John Russo doesn't have a single fucking shred of anything nice to say about this movie. Nobody should. It's terrible. It's awful. And that's all I got for this episode of Worst Movies Ever. Next episode, guys, and I turned it on and started watching it, and it's a real fucking doozy, is some low-budget fucking crime movie called Revenge of the First Wives. That's coming to you soon. So, thank you for listening. Take care, people.
Worst Movies Ever podcast is executive produced by Vaughn Kuhlmeyer and Shannon Smith. For more Worst Movies Ever, and to make the Doctor watch your worst movies ever, subscribe to the Worst Movies Ever Patreon at patreon.com/Worst Movies Ever. There you will get a monthly exclusive WME podcast plucked from the user-generated film list, randomized episode to episode. Until next time, celebrate trash at all costs. Toodles.